The senior senator from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Patti Page died on New Year's Day this year. She was 85 years old. The Senate has not been in session for most of the time since then. I wanted to come to the floor today to pay a Tennessean's tribute to Patti Page. Patti Page is best known for our state song, the Tennessee Waltz. And a few years ago, in 2007, when I met her for the first time, she told me the story of the Tennessee Waltz. I knew some of it, but she completed the rest of it. 1946, a couple of Tennesseans, Pee Wee King and Red Stewart, were driving from Memphis to Nashville. That was before interstate highways. It took a pretty good amount of time to drive that distance. I don't know whether they were drinking a beer or not on the way from Memphis to Nashville, but they were relaxed, and one of them said to the other, why is it that Kentucky and Missouri have a waltz and Tennessee doesn't have a waltz? And so on the way from Memphis to Nashville, they took out a penny matchbox, which is one of these big boxes with wooden matches in it, dumped out the matches on the floorboard of the car, and on the back of the penny matchbox between Nashville and Memphis and Nashville in 1946, Pee Wee King and Red Stewart wrote the Tennessee Waltz. They sang it around a few places. Pee Wee King sang it on the opera. Grand Ole Opry, nobody paid much attention to it. Cowboy Copas sang it. They sang it on Red Foley's show in Springfield, Missouri. Nothing much happened to the Tennessee Waltz until 1950. And this is the story that Patti Page told me. Mercury Records in New York had a new song that they were sure was going to be a big hit. It was called Boogie Woogie Santa Claus. Now, I don't know whether it was a follow-up to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but the executives in New York were sure it was going to get a big hit. So they wanted the hottest young female singer in America to record Boogie Woogie Santa Claus, and they settled on Patti Page. So they flew her to New York City. She recorded it for Mercury Records. And then in those days, you always had to put a record on the back of the main record. You had to pick a song. It would be the B-side. And just as a throwaway, they put on the back of it the song that Pee Wee King and Red Stewart wrote, the Tennessee Waltz. Well, we know the rest of the story. The Tennessee Waltz sold about 5 million copies. Nobody ever heard of Boogie Woogie Santa Claus, except those who bought the Tennessee Waltz. Mike Curb, who runs Curb Records in Nashville, told me it was the best-selling record ever by a female artist. Patti Page eventually sold 100 million records. She was the top-selling female artist in record sales in history. Growing up, I heard her songs, Mockingbird Hill, I Went to Your Wedding, Old Cape Cod. 1952, she had a song called How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? Sounds like a silly little song, but it sold a lot of records, and a great many Americans remember it. In the 1980s, when I was governor of Tennessee, I would travel to Japan recruiting industry. In the evening, I'd go to restaurants and a bar with Japanese friends, and to my astonishment, all the Japanese friends, many of whom didn't know much English, could sing every word of the Tennessee Waltz. And when I inquired about it, it was because it was introduced during the time of the American occupation in Japan, 1950 or so. And according to them, that Asian music doesn't have the same kind of standard that American music has. We get a phrase or a theme in our minds and we never forget it, like the Tennessee Waltz. So the Tennessee Waltz became a song that most Japanese men of that age knew, remembered, and could sing from memory. I met Patti Page for the first time 6 years ago. It was 2007. She was about 79 or 80 years of age at the time. She told me the story of the recording of the Tennessee Waltz for Mercury Records. Turned out it was her last recording session. Mike Curb, the owner of Curb Records, had invited her to come to Nashville and record an album, Best of Patti Page. And he'd invited me to come play the piano while she sang the Tennessee Waltz, which I did. It was a real thrill, and she was very patient to put up with an amateur piano player for her very special song. She told me then it wasn't the first time she'd performed with a Tennessee governor. In 1950, she'd performed with Tennessee Governor Gordon Browning at a Memphis theater. This was when she was all the rage, Tennessee was all the rage, and the governor wanted to sing with her. She said, I asked how it went. She said, well, to tell you the truth, the governor wasn't a very good singer. I don't know what she said to others about my piano playing, but I do know that was probably about as harsh a verdict as Patti Page ever rendered of any other person. According to the New York Times obituary, Patti Page once said, I don't think I've stepped on anyone along the way. If I have, I didn't mean to. Well, Patti Page is gone now, but her music is not. And whenever we Tennesseans hear our state song, the Tennessee Waltz, played, or whenever we sing it, we'll remember the voice of Patti Page. Mr. President, I ask consent to include in the record following my remarks the obituary about Patti Page from the New York Times.